because they have an automatic monopoly of an absolute life necessity. And I don't know what goes on in the head of people like Stockton did this, a lot of cities have in this country, and then realized a year later, gee, maybe we made a mistake because people are going broke trying to afford the water. That's just so stupid. I mean, naturally, if you have a monopoly and you're for profit, why wouldn't you raise the price? The reason they sell them off initially is they don't have the extra cash to modernize their system, to run new pipes and so on. But to sell it off to a private firm, I just can't imagine what was in their heads. Of course they're going to raise the rates, and they did. And then they try to buy them back, and they get screwed on a buyback. It's just nuts.
So these private companies, acquisition the water supply, and then they were owning, the commons had none. They were the predominant owner of this resource.
Yes.
Okay, see, most libertarians would find that deplorable. I know Nozick had a clause that was, you have to leave about half in the commons as is for a company. So that's a violation of the hard.
Was that in anarchist utopia, or?
That was, yes. He said that it has to have as much in the commons. Because libertarians recognize that that is an inevitable motive of human nature. And their goal isn't to keep everything off, your hands off. I mean, a lot of, Nozick himself, even later in life, acquiesced that there needs to be, I think he would call it a corporate welfare state, where there's just enough amount of corporation, but just enough regulation to make sure that that commons requirement was met. And places like Stockton have an obvious breaking of that, and it's the consequences and implications seem to be rightfully so on the evil side,
Right.
And so the idea of a commons is often not discussed in any of this.
Right.
It's what corporation, what's their motive, and can they get their hands on it? And I think that really skews the idea of it. I like the idea of energy sources being halfway run by a need to get the consumers what they need at low prices, but if you have one company owning all of the water, they're going to set prices.
Right.
So if the government needs to intervene in circumstances where the people in the commons can't make their decisions or can't get what is fair to them, then I don't think any libertarian would disagree with that.
I should mention one positive effect of big government like we do have, the largest economic entity in the world, the U.S. government, is they can play a great incentive role towards starting new industries. For example, if you want to really go big on solar cars or electric cars, the government has 1 million cars, I don't know how many, but they could start buying up. They would create a market for new companies who want to innovate on cars, but are worried about investing in it if they didn't have a market, where the government can guarantee a market. Say, we'll buy X numbers of electric cars, and that gets the confidence in the innovators who want to start a new business to say, okay, we'll have a market. If we dump our money in this, investors will back us up. And then once you get a toehold into making cars, then you can go into the regular commercial market successfully.
Then you're creating the government's creating a false market.
It could be a risk.
I mean, you're taking taxpayers' money, you're taking, our money to do some type of investment.
Right.
But what if that turns out to be a bad investment, like Solyndra, for example? Then you're pretty much throwing people's money down the drain. I think people are best at deciding what's best with their money if they invest it themselves, rather than someone else taking the money and doing that investment for them.
That's a valid argument. The government could make mistakes. I will mention, though, on the Solyndra thing, which Romney did so much hoo-hoo about, the government invested a pile of money in green energy companies. The Solyndra failed, but 98% of them worked, and they are flourishing. And the argument for doing that was, you're always got some risk that there's going to be some failures, but the failure percentage-wise wasn't that big. It was blown up hugely by, understandably, by Romney and the conservatives, because they were, it's a nice way to show Obama's going down the wrong road. But actually the investments in green energy, something like 50 different companies were started, and most of them are flourishing. There were some blunders, Solyndra being probably the biggest one, but I think it's a great way it's kind of a government-corporate partnership that benefits the public when you want to start a new industry. The government has such a huge capacity to serve as a market initially, you're taking risks, I'll agree, it has to be done intelligently and thoughtfully, but everybody's talking about going green these days, and the government can play a big role in that. Probably.
If I may comment on that, as a self-described libertarian, that's a left-leaning libertarian, I am very confused as to why other libertarians have not found the green movement to be a complete necessity and economic survival for themselves in the future. And what I mean by that is it's inevitable. The science at large, the community at large has deemed global warming obvious.
Yeah.
There's implications. They're so busy fighting that. Libertarians like Cato Institute and a lot of these other, think tanks are really just attacking the other side, saying, they're just trying to implement socialist policies. But really what it is it's a brand new market full of potentiality, and they're trying to save the other markets that have had 100 years of research and development and government subsidy, and I'm talking about forms of fuel and the like, when really they have a horizon right in front of them that if they just took a little bit of that money that they're using, the Koch brothers, if you will, that's what I call them. If they were to just take a couple of those billions away from Citizens United and start to making cells that were more efficient, that would be a different story, right?
Right.
Right, and then people would buy that shit up. Unfortunately, they see the longevity of what they're currently doing, the people's reliance on it, and they fear taking that away is going to, there's going to be a better guy in town who comes by and does it. And necessarily so if they don't jump on the bandwagon and push for that. I never understood why going green couldn't be a completely capitalist endeavor, one that not only made it cheaper for the smaller guy in society, but made our environment a lot healthier. I'm really disappointed as a self.
Even everybody's holding their fingers at what's green energy because the solar industry has been depending on a tax break for the last few years under Obama. It's coming up for renewal, and I don't think it's happened, and it will have to happen in the next few months. That's going to be crucial. If he takes away the tax break, that can put the kibosh on a lot of small companies trying to make it in solar energy.
The reason a lot of people haven't gotten behind it is because it's still expensive and the technology is still 15 to 20 years out to being commercially viable in comparison to oil.
I get that, and the same thing could have been said about the people who started oil. They're just like, oh shit,
yeah,
it's so expensive to drill this little liquid out of the ground.
And that's where government investment, I like calling it investment because it's not government subsidizing a company. We're investing in a direction. China does the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah,
well,
countries have to do investments now.
Japan
people
did.
making the investments. See, one thing that I used to think about in the minimal state is just like, we've got to get rid of complete taxation, but no, that's not necessary insofar as we can have little pools for things like this, that when we need to nudge the ethos of society towards something like cleaner environment and better resources or better fuels, I think that we should have something for that. I really think that it's a necessity. Also, I know that this one is something I wanted to talk to you about. I'm really all about nuclear, and I know that you aren't.
Pro-nuclear?
Yeah,
Really?
so amicable to the idea, namely because of the environmental risks associated with it. I'm definitely...
Even with Fukushima, you're okay?
Am I okay? No, nobody's okay at the loss of people, but they also, Michio Kaku was screaming at them 3 days before to cement it, and there's other things that can be done, and if there's safety regulations, I don't think that we should lose the capacity of a very, very valuable resource, one that's very promising, just because of the little bit of damage it can do. Look at the Gulf. Oil can do it too.
Yeah.
We need better protocol rather than
thorium.
Huh?
Thorium. They're now looking into nuclear technology involving thorium, which is obviously different from plutonium and uranium. The difference is thorium, unlike plutonium and uranium, it's not viable to be used as like a weapon. It can't be weaponized. It's also more stable than both of the other options. So it's a new technology that they're doing some research in. You can find some articles online.
Cool.
But it's really a technology to look out for in terms of the nuclear industry.
Right.
And I think that is going to be the other option to go with because I'm in favor of nuclear.
I like it too, and I do like the idea of solar as well. I was watching Science Channel the other day, and they're talking about some like really fucking awesome ways of projecting. What I saw was they wanted to put this this thing out into our fuck, come on, I'll give you the words.
Oh, to capture the sunlight on the
Yeah, they were going
atmosphere?
to send a satellite out and have it directing rays to certain areas. It was going to harvest 3% extra of the sunlight and stick it onto solar pods that you put in your cities, and then it would run the electricity to the city, and they would be completely just.
That'd be one powerful ray.
That would, well, it doesn't just go to one place, it's deflected into to several different cities. So it's just harnessing more, and all it would need is, and at the same time, it would be blocking 3%, not 3%, I'm sorry, a different percentage amount of the sun's rays coming in, so that would keep the environment from.
3%, so this must be huge. I mean,
Yeah,
block
but the
3%.
technology it would require and the time it would take, a lot of the scientists are like, this is fucking pipe dream.
Yeah.
So that's the other problem is the increasing necessity to have these things, plus the timeline in which we need to get them done. Dovetailing with what you were saying, I think that the nuclear is definitely a start. It's just crazy whenever you see people in Japan dying over things like this. But I don't think that we should run. Like fracking, I think is a little more dangerous. It's
Fracking
new.
causes earthquakes.
It not only causes earthquakes, but it just fucks up the land.
Yeah.
They use
Really?
some nasty super
Yeah.
chemicals.
One of the problems with nuclear is that you're trading a resource that we're gathering from one unstable part of the planet for a resource that we would be gathering from a different unstable part of the planet. So we've got some uranium resources in, I think, South or North Dakota, and then most of it comes from Africa. And do we really want to be trading unstable countries in the Middle East for unstable countries in Africa?
Well,
So, and it's not a renewable resource, obviously, and then you still have the problems of what do you do with the plutonium that's created in the process and the radioactive byproducts.
that's definitely moral and ethical and financial considerations for the future, but having millions of years of half-lives, we've got some time to figure that out, right?
Yeah.
That's the big question mark.
Yeah.
No, I certainly agree we ought to do more research on nuclear, and maybe thorium reactors are the way to go. Always could use more knowledge. But just to be the existing reactors are so risky. They're all getting old now. All the pipes are corroding, they crack, electricity, there's fires. There's going to be some nasty stuff going on in the US as well as other places. We've got about 100 reactors. They're just cranky old things. And Japan is terrifying. That one reactor is still melting. And some people are predicting it could be worse than Chernobyl. That's a lot of people.
I mean, the radiation flew over from the sea into Sacramento, I remember. I mean, it doesn't
Yeah,
just
and it's
stop
coming through the
there.
atmosphere, mostly through the Northwest. I wouldn't want to have a newborn baby in Seattle, for example. It's scary stuff. But yeah, more research, fine.
But the alternatives are burning coal,
Yeah,
gasoline,
ugly.
and I
Well,
mean,
another
Go ahead.
Another huge problem is our electricity infrastructure is just abysmal. You would think with all the technology we have, there'd be some smart electrical engineer sitting in a control room somewhere going, oh, power just went out over here. But the power companies don't know power's gone out until somebody calls them. They have no monitoring of their systems. So the smart grid technologies and being able to account for peak power and going, oh, well, people over here aren't using as much, so we can direct it over here. That saves just an incredible amount of electricity just doing that. That's really, that's a really interesting new industry too, because you can take it directly from like a solar farm, and then you can see how much electricity is being. They've got software to handle that stuff, and then direct it to different urban centers, and then with the electrical cars, that can be built in. You charge in your electrical car, and they can pull power from your car when they need extra, and then pump it back in when they don't. So that's all new technology that's just been emerging in the past 4 or 5 years.
And that's beautiful because technology is solving a technological issue, thankfully, and that requires the work of the engineers, the government, the people within society. I mean, it's a multifarious effort. I don't think it's solved by the government intervention alone. And I don't think that taking away taxpayer money is going to solve it either. I think there's a collaborative effort underlying all of these arguments, right?
Let me ask you guys, are you guys frightened by global warming, or you think they'll find ways of dealing with it?
I'm more frightened by the fact that
It's,
That they were what?
They're refusing to fund.
Oh, right.
I'm frightened with the way a lot of conservatives are deeming this an issue. What really scares me is the complete bold-faced denial. Though I want to talk to those people.
Oh, the deniers are,
Yeah, just
Well,
there's
over
no
the
such
edge.
thing. And then you've got the lukewarmers as they're emerging. Yeah, it's warming, but it's at such a low percentage. It's not going to do anything. It's like you're staring in the eyes of evil, and you're denying that it's there. It's like
they're talking about the Arctic Ocean being ice-free by 1920, by 2020.
you know, you see these little polar bears sitting, floating in the ice, and I hear Ayn Rand in the back of my head. And you'd rather save a polar bear than help a human.
And
It's like, come on, bitch, really? That's not what you're
I found it disturbing that that was a laugh line at the Republican National Convention.
really,
Well, the morality that bases that's very actually religious in a sense. It's humans are better than any other creature, and we deserve to.
Well,
to-
I
to-
mean-
The material that I've seen has suggested that we're past the point of prevention, and we're at the point of, okay, what can we do to mediate?
how to live in
some
a
of-
desert climate.
Yeah, what can we do to?
The science
change our-
committee is
our
going
plans?
bonkers over this. I mean, they're not good at PR, and they're just freaking out because they're saying, you know, we've only got a tiny window to do much of anything about it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Another argument from that I've been reading